Okay, so today, my name is Nanda Ang. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm currently a second year, and I have done just like a little bit of a background about myself. I have done the Internal Moot, Asia Cup, and IHL. And today I will be explaining to you on just like a brief general idea of how to break down a moot problem using my case during Asia Cup. And of course, the substantive issues of this case may not be relevant to the current issues that you may face in your moot problem. So um, I will not be going into depth of this problem itself so as not to confuse you guys, but also I will try to give you a brief understanding of how to analyze a mood problem. Okay, so um, just the first step in having a mood problem is to just read through it. And you'll notice that the first few paragraphs are giving you the context and to the countries, and eventually in other paragraphs as well, they will give you a context, like a kind of a background to before the whole shebang occurs. So in this case, it says, okay, there are two countries, Aval and Resi. Aval is a less developed country compared to Resi, and Resi is the respondent. Aval is the applicant. So they're usually spelled with an A and an R. So yeah, and basically you are going to have a read through the mood problem itself multiple times, and I recommend that you highlight certain parts which you find interesting or may be good for argumentation, because usually the facts themselves are at times very much, you know, um, ambiguous, or they may indicate one thing or might be also the other. Also, I recommend that not to argue with the facts, rather argue with case law. Anyways, so um, these paragraphs will show you the context. For example, in Resi consumer income says that only 30% of the population who are in, of course, more rich are more aware of environmental concerns. So basically, as to the context of this current case, it is between two countries, and Resi as a country wanted to increase its sustainability concerns throughout its neighboring countries as well. But in doing so, they did it in a very discriminatory way by kind of also um, targeting these standards towards AVIL, a respondent state. So this causes trade restrictions and, of course, trade concerns, which is in violation of WTO law. So um, just going through the text itself again, there's also GEE, which is a company within Resi, which uses, oh, sorry, within AVIL, which is the main kind of bad guy here. Um, just looking at it objectively, they would, abuse its workforce, kind of exploit them, make them stay for lengthy hours, make them pay very little so that they can churn out a lot of garments. Anyway, a fire incident happened, and then the ILO had to intervene. Then Resi started to raise its concerns by broadcasting a kind of a dramatized version of what happens inside the GEE garment factory. Then, of course, the people of Avil as well, they started to raise their concerns. Um, then kind of the point of contention, the real crux of the issue starts around here on paragraph 16. So in your moot problem itself, there will be like a background context, a conflict that happens, casualties that happen. Then I will be explaining upon the law of the WTO. And in this case, it kind of starts here. The trade restrictions start due to the law that is in force here, the Red Tag Act. And so, in further reading, Abel says developing countries cannot be kind of discriminated against by developed countries because that's not really fair, right? Due to their unique socio-economic realities. Basically, it's not fair for developed countries to impose its own um, standards upon underdeveloped countries, and that's what Abel contends. And at the same time, Resi also gives preference to a third state, which is not kind of discriminatory. The discriminatory intent is obvious towards Abel, that they would even give um, preference to a third state and also give preference to its own like national companies within its own nation. So GEE supply chain is unethical. Then later on, even after the Red Tag Act, the people within Resi still buy GEE, which is very contradictory, which would mean that the Red Tag Act itself is not kind of useful. It's not raising any concerns, ethical concerns towards garments. And you see that with a poll. And it says, okay, like we don't care. GEE, so slay, whatever. So then this indicates that Maluna, the third country, is much worse off than Apple. So these are multiple points in which arguments may arise in just like a brief of the moot problem itself. So I'm just giving you the background context so I can get into the analysis of the problem. Okay, and Abel contends that this is inconsistent with the general tariffs and trade, the GATT of the WTO. Then this is more upon the WTO dispute settlement, which is a procedural aspect. So in a moot problem, you're going to have two aspects. The substantive, which I was talking about, the labor issues here and there, the actual kind of like what happened and what law, what obligation does the state violate. Then you have another issue, which is the procedural. In this case, I'm not sure for your moot problem, but the procedural case is that whether this can go to the ICJ or not, even though there is already another body that is more competent to rule upon the same topic. Okay, so I will not be going over these paragraphs because these are the procedural aspects. So eventually you will reach these two paragraphs, which would be what you have to center your whole argument around. So, like I've said before, paragraph A here is that the court has jurisdiction from the side of the applicant, Avil, which wants to send this to the ICJ because they feel that since the WTO is not working, it has to be sent to the ICJ, and that it's the Red Tag Act is inconsistent with the obligations under Article 3.4, and basically they violate the law, right? And Resi says, no need to go to ICJ. and we don't violate the law. Even if we do violate the law, it is still justified. So the thing about moot problems is that you will have these two paragraphs, then you structure your whole argument around these two paragraphs, right? I'm giving you a very brief. So in going into the analysis of the moot problems, you first start with what the law is regarding this, right? So this is Article 3.4. What is Article 3.4? So you search it up, you just perhaps even not the you search up the law itself, of course, then you go into the nitty-gritty, the explanations, the cases by reading just an article that explains it, um, so that you get like a proper context. Then then there will be certain elements, certain conditions that you have to fulfill. And in doing so, you go back to the case. So Article 3.4 of the GATT, Article 3.4, it should be like non-discriminatory. So clearly for the side of Avel, it is obvious this is discriminating against it. But Resi, it has to kind of come up with an innovative kind of like a legal um like a legal barrier as to why they show that, okay, we are not discriminating because according to this fact and this element, it is non-discriminatory because it is even-handed, it applies to all garments equally. So that you go back to the case, right? And the thing about this is that the facts themselves are ambiguous, right? The facts themselves are ambiguous so that it is helpful for both sides. And um, in Article 3.4, that is the like the most favored nation treatment under the WTO. It legal jargon, I know, but basically in terms of the respondent state, which I took, is that okay? Um, the applicant state would say, okay, your people don't even care about the act itself. Why even implement it? Then the respondent state could say, oh, but then again, why does the awareness have to be immediate? It can come on later. So uh, the applicant state contends that we should not be aware of such things at all? Or should we not take steps in order to implement sustainable clothing? Something like that. So it's kind of like a um it basically you're arguing by using the facts themselves. And in these facts, the respondent state have to come up with quite creative arguments. And I believe in your moot problem also, you may have to come up with creative arguments in trying to contend that, okay, even if the facts indicate this, it is in the interest of the state that we are trying to implement this for future use or something like that. Okay, um, going back to these. So the thing about your argumentation is that even if the court is not convinced by one argument, you should have a alternative argument. So for example, Kingdom of Resi court lacks jurisdiction, right? And even if the court has jurisdiction, the application is inadmissible. So that's your second, like plan B, sort of. If the court isn't convinced by this, then we are going to go to this. So in It's Asia Cup, and I believe your internal moot problem will kind of give you the whole context and like what you have to argue. So do not fret. Um, Here, in the case of the respondent state, court lacks jurisdiction to entertain AVIL submission, blah, blah, blah. And then even if the court has jurisdiction, it is admissible due to the abusive process, something like that. Um, then in and then after you have these arguments, you're going to have to go into the very elements and the conditions of the arguments themselves. So back to Article 3, 4. If the court is not convinced by Article 3, 4, then you go to the justification under Article 20. So this is justified because this is a public moral concern. Then you have to go to saying like, okay, this is a public moral concern because forced labor is a very widespread issue that many countries want to you know, stop. So that's kind of the structure in which you have to formulate your arguments, and that is kind of how you break down a moot problem. First, you read through the facts, you try to highlight certain paragraphs which may be useful to you in accordance with your stance. Then, if these, because certain facts may be ambiguous, you may also come up with certain contentions that you can say it's for future use, or that even if the court is not convinced, you say there is a justification available. And the elements and the conditions within the law itself it always almost relates back to your case. And there are usually ongoing cases or or like cases that are already there that may be very similar to your current case. So when you try to analyze a moot problem, always know that if you reach a stump, try to find what the case law is. That's what I like to do. There's usually always a case. And that is all from me in analysis of a moot problem. Thank you.